After her aunt died, Linnea Forsberg inherited an old house beside a frozen lake. While cleaning the attic, she discovered a hidden room no one had ever mentioned. Inside were hundreds of boxes, dozens of letters, and a secret that had been buried for nearly 20 years. What Linnea found in that room would completely change the story she believed about her childhood, her family, and the mother she lost when she was 7 years old. Because hidden inside that attic was proof that someone had spent years searching for her, and the truth was far more heartbreaking and far more beautiful than she ever imagined. Linnea Forsberg was 25 years old. The winter her life changed forever. Now, Linnea wasn't the kind of person who expected good things to happen. Not anymore. Life had a way of teaching people what to expect, and by 25, Linnea had learned not to expect much at all. She worked evenings at an elderly care home in northern Norrbotten, caring for residents who often talked about their children, grandchildren, and the families waiting for them at home. Linnea listened to every story. She remembered every name. And every night, when her shift ended, she climbed into her aging Volvo and drove home alone. The drive wasn't long, but sometimes she sat in the parking lot of her apartment building for 10 or 15 minutes before going inside. Not because she was tired, because no one was waiting for her there. The apartment itself was small. One bedroom, one worn-out couch, one kitchen table pushed against a window overlooking a snow-covered alley. On her birthday each year, Linnea stopped at the grocery store on her way home from work and bought herself a single chocolate muffin, usually. She never told anyone it was her birthday. There didn't seem much point. No one was coming. No one ever had. Linnea had been 7 years old when she lost her mother. After that, life became a series of temporary places, temporary bedrooms, temporary schools, temporary families. People were kind for the most part, but kindness and belonging weren't always the same thing. By the time she reached adulthood, Linnea had stopped asking questions about where she came from. She stopped wondering whether anyone out there remembered her. And little by little, she convinced herself that being forgotten was simply part of who she was. Then, on a gray December afternoon, her phone rang. The call came from a lawyer. At first, she thought it was a mistake. The woman on the other end asked a question that made Linnea pause. "Did you know someone named Agneta Sjoberg?" The name felt distant, like hearing a song you remembered from childhood but couldn't quite place. There was a faint image in her mind, a gentle smile, soft hands, a warm voice reading a story. But that was all. Agneta Sjoberg had passed away, and according to her will, she had left everything to Linnea. A lakeside house, all of her belongings, and one final request. The attic was not to be opened by anyone except Linnea Forsberg. Linnea sat in silence after the call ended. Nobody had ever left her anything before. Not a house, not a family heirloom, not even a goodbye letter. Outside, snow drifted slowly past her window. Inside, for the first time in years, something stirred beneath the loneliness. A question. Who was Agneta Sjoberg? And why had she spent her final days thinking about a girl she barely knew? What Linnea couldn't possibly understand then was that the answer had been waiting for her for nearly 2 decades, hidden behind a locked door in a quiet attic beside a frozen lake. And inside that room was that would force her to question the one thing she had believed since she was 7 years old, that nobody had ever come looking for her. The drive to Agneta Sjoberg's house took almost 4 hours. Linnea nearly turned back more than once, not because of the snow, not because of the icy roads, but because the entire situation felt unreal. People didn't leave houses to strangers. At least, they didn't leave them to women like Linnea Forsberg, not to someone who had spent most of her life feeling like she belonged to nowhere. Yet, kilometer after kilometer, she kept driving past frozen rivers, past old red-painted barns buried in snow, past small towns glowing softly beneath Christmas lights. As evening settled across northern Norrbotten, she finally caught sight of the lake. And there it was, the house, standing alone near the shoreline, quiet, weathered, watching the frozen water as though it had been waiting for something or someone for a long time. Linnea simply sat in her car. The engine idled softly. Snowflakes drifted across the windshield. And for reasons she couldn't explain, her chest felt heavy, not with fear, with sadness. The house looked lonely, the way lonely people sometimes recognize loneliness in others. The lawyer had left the key beneath a flower pot on the front porch, exactly where he said it would be. Linnea climbed the wooden steps and unlocked the front door. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, the house was silent. Not empty, silent. There's a difference. Empty houses feel abandoned. This house felt remembered, as though the woman who lived there had only stepped out for a moment. A knitted blanket rested across the arm of a chair. Reading glasses sat beside an open book. A half-finished jigsaw puzzle covered a table near the window. Linnea found herself standing still in the middle of the living room. She didn't know Agneta Sjoberg. Yet, somehow, she felt guilty for being there. Like she was walking through someone else's memories. Someone who had somehow remembered her. Over the next 2 days, she explored the house slowly. The kitchen, the bedrooms, the basement. Every room offered pieces of Agneta's life, but none offered answers. Who was this woman? Why had she left everything to Linnea? And why had she specifically asked that no one enter the attic except her? The questions followed Linnea everywhere, even into her dreams. On the third morning, she was cleaning out a closet in Agneta's bedroom when she noticed something she'd overlooked before. A small brass key hanging from a hook inside the wardrobe. Attached to it was a faded tag. The handwriting had nearly disappeared with time, but 3 words remained perfectly clear. For Linnea. She stared at the key, then read the tag again. For Linnea. Not for the lawyer, not for the executor, not for anyone else. For Linnea, a strange feeling moved through her chest. For 25 years, almost nothing in life had been meant specifically for her. Most things had belonged to someone else first. Secondhand furniture, secondhand clothes, temporary homes, temporary families. But this had been waiting for her. The realization made her hands tremble. Slowly, she wrapped her fingers around the key. The metal felt cold, old, important. And suddenly, she remembered the lawyer's final words. The attic was not to be opened by anyone except Linnea Forsberg. Her heart began beating faster. Not out of fear, out of anticipation, as if she were standing on the edge of something she couldn't yet see. The attic staircase groaned beneath her weight as she climbed. The higher she went, the quieter the house became. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched before her. Dust floated through thin beams of winter sunlight. The air smelled faintly of cedar wood and old paper. At the very end stood a single white door, locked, waiting. Linnea approached slowly. Every step seemed louder than the last. She stopped in front of the door. The key felt heavy in her hand now. Heavier than metal should feel. Because somehow she knew whatever was behind that door mattered. The lock clicked, a simple sound, yet it echoed through the hallway. For a moment, she couldn't move. Her hand rested on the doorknob, her heart pounded. Then she turned it. The door opened and Linnea froze because the room beyond wasn't what she expected. There were no antiques, no stacks of money, no hidden family treasure. Instead, shelves lined every wall. Dozens of them. And on every shelf sat carefully organized boxes. Hundreds of boxes, each labeled with a year, year after year, stretching across nearly 2 decades, as though someone had been preserving time itself. Linnea stepped into the room. The air felt warmer here. Gentler, somehow, like entering a place built for memory. In the center stood an old wooden desk, and resting on top was a single envelope. Nothing else, just one envelope, cream-colored, unopened. Waiting. Linnea moved closer, then stopped. Her name was written across the front, Linnea Forsberg. The handwriting was careful, elegant, almost affectionate, as if the person writing it had taken their time, as if her name mattered. A lump formed in Linnea's throat. She couldn't remember the last time something had been prepared specifically for her. No birthday cards, no graduation gifts, no letters, nothing. Yet here sat an envelope that had clearly been waiting for her for years. Slowly, she sat at the desk. Outside, snow drifted across the frozen lake. Inside, the house seemed to hold its breath. Linnea opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten letter. At the top, it read, "My dearest Linnea." The words alone nearly broke her. Is greater than, clears throat, is greater than, clears throat. No one had ever called her that, not that she could remember. She blinked hard and continued reading. If you are reading this, then I am gone. And if I know you at all, you are probably wondering why a woman you barely remember would leave you her home. Linnea swallowed. Her eyes burned. Then she reached the next line, and everything changed. I have wanted to tell you the truth for nearly 20 years. Her breath caught. The room suddenly felt very still. She kept reading, and then she saw the sentence that made her heart stop. I promised your mother that I would never stop looking for you. Linnea stared at the words, once, twice, 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. Outside, the snow continued falling. Inside, the life she thought she understood began to crack open. Because for the first time since she was 7 years old, there was proof. Proof that someone had remembered her. Proof that someone had cared. And as she slowly lifted her eyes toward the hundreds of boxes surrounding her, a question settled deep in her heart. What had Agneta Sjoberg spent 20 years trying to tell her? Linnea didn't realize how long she sat there. The letter remained open in her hands. The room around her had gone completely silent. Only the faint ticking of an old clock somewhere downstairs reminded her that time was still moving. I promised your mother that I would never stop looking for you. She read the sentence again and again. For years, Linnea had carried a story inside her heart. A simple story, a painful one. Her mother died, everyone moved on, and somehow she had been left behind. That story had become part of her identity, something she stopped questioning long ago. But now, those few words had cracked that story wide open. Slowly, Linnea lowered the letter and looked around the room. At the shelves, at the boxes, at the years written carefully on each label. Every year of her life. A chill moved through her body. Not from fear, from realization. Someone had been thinking about her all this time. Someone had been keeping track. Someone had remembered. Her eyes settled on the first box. The year she turned 8. The year after she entered the foster care system. The year she remembered crying herself to sleep for months because she believed no one knew where she was anymore. Linnea stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady. She carried the box back to the desk and carefully lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of envelopes, photographs, cards, small notes tied together with faded ribbon. At the very top rested another letter. The envelope simply read, "For Linnea's 8th birthday." Linnea stared at it. Her hands began to shake. Nobody had ever given her a birthday letter. Nobody. Not once. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The paper was yellowed with age. The handwriting matched the letter she had just read. Agneta's. Dear Linnea, today you are turning 8 years old. I don't know where you are tonight. I don't know if anyone remembered your birthday, but I want you to know that I did. Linnea covered her mouth. The words blurred. She blinked through tears and kept reading. I bought a chocolate muffin today. I put a candle in it, and I made a wish for you. I wished that, wherever you are, someone is being kind to you. A sob escaped before Linnea could stop it. The room suddenly felt too small, too full, too heavy, because she remembered that birthday. She remembered sitting alone in a foster home kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. No cake, no little presents, no card, just a little girl trying not to cry because she didn't want anyone to hear. And all those years ago, while she sat there believing nobody remembered, Agneta Sjoberg had lit a candle for her. Alone, kilometers away, Linnea pressed the letter against her chest. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. For 25 years, she had thought she was forgotten. Yet, here was proof that she wasn't. Not even then. Especially not then. After several minutes, she reached back into the box. Another envelope, age 9, then 10, then 11, every single year, every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation. There was a letter, a card, a memory, a prayer. Some years, Agneta included photographs of places she hoped Linnea might one day visit. Other years, she included pressed flowers from her garden. One envelope contained a newspaper clipping about a local scholarship. Another held a recipe for blueberry pie. Little pieces of a life, little pieces of love, stored away year after year, waiting. Linnea opened a letter from her 16th birthday. The tears returned almost immediately. Sweet Linnea, today you are 16. I imagine you might be learning to drive. You probably think adults have all the answers. Trust me, we don't. But there is one thing I know with certainty. You are stronger than you realize. And one day, when life finally tells you the truth, I hope you discover how deeply you have always been loved. Linnea lowered the letter. Her shoulders shook. She couldn't remember the last time she cried like this. Maybe never. Because this wasn't grief. It wasn't sadness. It was something harder to describe. The pain of realizing how wrong she'd been. For years, she had believed no one cared enough to look for her. Now, she sat surrounded by proof that someone had. Every year, every birthday, every Christmas morning, every milestone, Agneta had remembered them all. Then, Linnea noticed something else inside the box. A photograph. Small and slightly faded. She picked it up carefully. The image showed Agneta standing beside a younger woman. Both were smiling. The younger woman held a little girl in her arms. Linnea froze. Her breath caught instantly. The little girl couldn't have been older than 5. Dark hair, wide eyes, a tiny yellow winter coat. Linnea knew that face because she had seen it before in one of the very few childhood photographs she still owned. The child was her, and the younger woman beside Agneta was her mother. Linnea stared at the photograph, unable to look away. For the first time in nearly 20 years, she was looking at her mother again. Not through memory, not through imagination, but through a moment frozen in time. The back of the photograph contained a handwritten note. Linnea turned it over and immediately felt her heart stop. The note wasn't written by Agneta. It was written by her mother. The handwriting was different, smaller, softer, and beneath the date were 11 words that changed everything. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll find her. Linnea sat motionless, the photograph trembling in her hands. Suddenly, the room around her felt different. The boxes, the letters, the years. This wasn't simply a collection of memories. It was a promise made between 2 women, one who had died and one who had spent nearly 20 years trying to keep her word. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the frozen lake. Inside the attic, Linnea slowly lifted her eyes toward the hundreds of unopened boxes surrounding her, and for the first time, she realized something that left her breathless. The letters weren't the secret. They were only the beginning because hidden somewhere inside those boxes was the story of why she had disappeared from Agneta's life in the first place and why it had taken nearly 20 years for them to find each other again. That night, Linnea didn't sleep. She tried. She lay in the small bedroom overlooking the frozen lake, staring at the ceiling while the wind brushed softly against the windows. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the letters, the birthdays, the photograph, her mother's handwritten words. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll find her. For years, Linnea had believed she understood her own story. She was the little girl nobody came back for, the little girl who slipped through the cracks, the little girl who simply wasn't wanted enough. It wasn't a pleasant story, but it was familiar. And people can grow surprisingly comfortable with familiar pain. The problem was that the attic had begun tearing that story apart piece by piece. By sunrise, Linnea found herself climbing the attic stairs again. This time, she wasn't searching for answers. She was searching for the truth, and she was beginning to understand those weren't always the same thing. The room felt different in the morning light, less mysterious, more personal, almost sacred, as though every box contained a piece of someone's heart. Linnea returned to the desk and opened the box labeled 2002, then 2003. Then 2004. Hours slipped by, letter after letter, memory after memory, and a picture slowly began to emerge. Agneta Sjoberg hadn't forgotten her, not once. In fact, she'd spent years trying to find her. Linnea discovered copies of legal documents, letters sent to agencies, requests for information, applications, appeals. Some had been approved. Most had not. Again and again, Agneta's name appeared beside the same request, information regarding Linnea Forsberg. Again and again and again. Is greater than, clears throat is greater than, each time followed by another rejection, another dead end, another closed door. Linnea sat quietly staring at the paperwork spread across the desk. For a long time, she didn't move because every document shattered another assumption she had carried for years. Agneta hadn't disappeared. Agneta had fought. She had fought harder than Linnea could have imagined. The realization hurt. Not because it was painful, because it was beautiful. And beauty can sometimes hurt more than sorrow, especially when you've spent years believing you were unloved. Near the bottom of one box, Linnea found a worn leather journal, Agneta's journal. The cover was faded from use. The pages filled with neat handwriting. Linnea opened it carefully. The first entry was dated 19 years earlier, just months after her mother's death. She began reading. Today they moved Linnea again. I don't know where, nobody will tell me. I keep calling, I keep writing. I promised her mother I wouldn't give up. The words struck Linnea harder than she expected. She turned the page. Another entry, then another, month after month, year after year, Agneta documented everything. The phone calls, the letters, the disappointments, the hope. One particular entry stopped Linnea cold. I saw her today. Linnea's heart jumped. The entry was dated 15 years earlier. She was standing outside a primary school holding a backpack nearly bigger than she was. I parked across the street because I wasn't allowed to approach her. I watched her laugh with another little girl. For the first time in months, she looked happy. I cried the entire drive home. Linnea lowered the journal. Tears filled her eyes once more. Agneta had seen her. Agneta had found her, at least for a moment. All those years ago, while Linnea was growing up believing she had been forgotten, someone had been watching from a distance. Not because she didn't care, because she wasn't allowed to come closer. The thought broke something open inside her, a wall she'd spent years building, a wall made from disappointment, from loneliness, from assumptions, and now it was beginning to crumble. As the afternoon sunlight shifted across the room, Linnea continued reading. The journal revealed something else, something she had never considered. Agneta had never married, never had children. She had lived alone in the house by the lake for decades. Yet, page after page centered on one person, Linnea. Birthday plans she could never deliver. Christmas gifts she could never send. Stories she wished she could tell. Dreams she hoped Linnea would one day achieve. It was there. A lifetime of love with nowhere to go. And suddenly, Linnea realized something that made her chest ache. Agneta had been lonely too. Not the same kind of lonely, but lonely all the same. For nearly 20 years, two people had been missing each other. One because she believed she'd been abandoned, the other because she couldn't reach the person she loved. Neither knowing how deeply the other cared, the tragedy of it stole Linnea's breath. Late that afternoon, another envelope slipped from between the journal pages. It was sealed. On the front, Agneta had written only one sentence. Open when you're ready to forgive yourself. Linnea frowned. Forgive herself? She carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten page. The message was short, very short. But by the time she finished reading it, tears streamed down her face. Linnea, if you ever find these letters, there is something I need you to know. You may spend years believing nobody came for you. You may even blame yourself for being left behind. Please don't. None of this was ever your fault. Not when you were 7, not when you were 17, not now. You were always worthy of love. You were always enough, and you were never forgotten. Linnea sat alone in the attic for a long time after that. The sun disappeared, the room grew darker, yet, for the first time in years, something inside her felt lighter. The loneliness she had carried for most of her life wasn't gone. Not entirely, but it had changed. Because loneliness feels different once you discover someone spent 20 years trying to find you. For 25 years, Linnea had looked at her life through the eyes of a child who believed she had been left behind. Now, she was beginning to see it through the eyes of a woman who had finally uncovered the truth. She hadn't been forgotten. She had been loved from a distance, protected from a distance, remembered from a distance. And somehow, that realization changed everything. As darkness settled over the frozen lake outside, Linnea looked around at the hundreds of unopened boxes still waiting on the shelves. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what she might find. Because she was beginning to understand that this attic wasn't hiding a secret. It was telling a love story. One that had taken nearly 20 years to reach its ending, and she had only just begun reading it. The next morning, Linnea woke before sunrise. For a few moments, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the stack of letters on the nightstand beside her bed, and everything came rushing back. Agneta, the attic, the photograph, the journal, the years of searching. The years of love she had never known existed. Linnea sat quietly at the edge of the bed, staring at the pale morning light spreading across the frozen lake outside. Something inside her had shifted. The questions that had haunted her for most of her life were finally beginning to find answers. But strangely enough, the answers weren't making her feel finished. They were making her feel responsible, as though Agneta had left her something far greater than a house, a purpose. By mid-morning, Linnea was back in the attic. The room no longer felt like a mystery. It felt like a conversation, one that Agneta had started years ago and somehow trusted Linnea to finish. She spent hours sorting through journals, letters, and photographs. Then, near the back of one shelf, she discovered a long wooden box she hadn't opened before. Unlike the others, it wasn't labeled by year. Instead, a small handwritten card was attached to the lid. It read, "For the ones who found their way back." Linnea frowned. Carefully, she lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of folders, each labeled with a name. Some contained photographs, others held letters. Many included handwritten notes from Agneta. Linnea pulled out the first folder. Inside was the story of a teenage boy who had spent years searching for his biological father. There were newspaper clippings, copies of letters, and finally a photograph showing the two of them reunited after 23 years apart. The next folder told the story of an elderly woman who had found her younger sister after more than 4 decades of separation. Another folder belonged to a veteran who had been reunited with a daughter he never knew existed. One by one, Linnea opened them, and with every folder, she learned something remarkable. Agneta had spent much of her life helping people reconnect. Families, parents, children, brothers, sisters, people separated by time, distance, tragedy, or circumstance. While most people spent their retirement slowing down, Agneta had spent hers bringing people back together. The realization brought tears to Linnea's eyes, because suddenly it made perfect sense. Agneta had spent 20 years searching for Linnea because searching for lost people wasn't simply something she did, it was who she was. Then, Linnea noticed a folded sheet of paper tucked beneath the folders. It appeared newer than everything else. The handwriting was Agneta's. Linnea unfolded it carefully. At the top was a list of names, dozens of them. Beside each name was a note. Some had question marks, some had addresses. Others had comments like, "Still searching for birth records, believes brother may be living in Scone, needs help locating daughter, no remaining leads." Linnea slowly read every line. The farther she went down the page, the heavier her heart became. These weren't completed stories. These were unfinished ones. People still waiting. The people still hoping. People still wondering. Exactly as she had once wondered. At the bottom of the page, Agneta had written one final note. The handwriting appeared weaker than elsewhere, as though it had been written near the end of her life. "If you're reading this, Linnea, it means I ran out of time." Linnea's throat tightened. She continued, "I always hoped I would finish helping these families, but life doesn't always give us as much time as we'd like. If you choose to do nothing, I will understand. You owe nobody anything. But if you decide to continue, start with Karin Johansson. She has been waiting longer than anyone." Linnea sat perfectly still. The attic seemed quieter than ever. Outside, wind swept softly across the frozen lake. Inside, Agneta's words settled deep within her heart. For years, Linnea had wondered why she was here, why she survived, why her life mattered. Now, for the first time, she felt as though someone was placing an answer gently into her hands. Not demanding, not forcing, as simply offering a chance to become part of something larger than herself. That afternoon, Linnea found Karin Johansson's folder. Karin was 46 years old. She lived less than 2 hours away. For more than 3 decades, she had been searching for information about her older sister who had disappeared after being placed into the foster care system as a child. The file was heartbreaking. Every lead ended in a dead end. Every search came back empty. Every year that passed made finding answers less likely. Yet Karin never stopped trying. Linnea stared at the photograph attached to the folder. There was something familiar in Karin's eyes. Not her face, not her age, her eyes. The same mixture of hope and disappointment Linnea had seen in the mirror most of her life. The expression of someone who wanted to believe but was afraid to. Linnea understood that feeling, perhaps better than anyone. She glanced around the attic one more time, at the letters, the photographs, the journals, and the life Agneta had built helping strangers become families again. Then she looked back at Karin's folder, and for the first time since arriving at the house, she smiled. A small smile, but a real one. because she finally understood something Agneta had been trying to teach her. The greatest gift she left behind wasn't the house. It wasn't the attic. It wasn't even the letters. It was the chance to give someone else the same miracle she had received, to help another lonely person discover they weren't forgotten, to help another family find its way home. That evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the frozen lake, Linnea sat at Agneta's old desk. She picked up her phone, opened the folder, found Karin's number, and after staring at it for nearly 5 minutes, she finally pressed call. The line began to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. And as Linnea waited for someone to answer, she couldn't shake the feeling that her real story was only just beginning. Karin Johansson answered on the 4th ring. Her voice sounded cautious. Not unfriendly, just careful. Like someone who had spent too many years hoping for good news and receiving disappointment instead. Hello? For a moment, Linnea almost hung up. Not because she was nervous, because suddenly she understood how much this phone call might mean to the woman on the other end. How many times Karin had probably answered unfamiliar numbers only to hear another dead end, another apology, another lead that led nowhere. Linnea took a breath. Karin? Yes? My name is Linnea Forsberg. A pause. I inherited Agneta Sjöberg's house. Silence. Then another pause. Longer this time. When Karin finally spoke again, her voice sounded different, smaller somehow. Agneta passed away. Linnea looked down, even though Karin couldn't see her. Yes? Oh, that single word carried enough sadness to fill the room. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Karin quietly asked, Did she leave something for me? Linnea swallowed. She left a file. Another silence, this one trembling at the edges, as though Karin were trying very hard not to hope too much. Could we meet? Linnea asked. Karin didn't answer immediately. Then she said something that stayed with Linnea for a very long time. I've been waiting 32 years for someone to ask me that. 3 days later, they met at a small cafe halfway between their towns. Karin was older than Linnea expected. 46, soft-spoken, brown hair streaked with gray, the kind of face that carried both kindness and heartbreak at the same time. Yet the moment Linnea saw her, she felt something familiar. Not because they knew each other, because she recognized the loneliness. Some wounds leave the same expression on different people. Karin arrived carrying a worn leather purse and a folder so old the corners had begun to fray. Before they even ordered coffee, she placed it carefully on the table. I bring it everywhere. Linnea glanced down. What is it? Karin gave a sad smile. Everything I have left of my sister. Linnea's heart tightened. She slowly slid Agneta's file across the table. Karin stared at it. For several seconds, she didn't touch it, as though she was afraid it might disappear. Then she opened it. Inside were photographs, notes, addresses, years of research Agneta had gathered. Linnea watched tears fill Karin's eyes almost immediately. Oh my God. She whispered it more to herself than anyone else. One photograph slipped from the folder. A young girl standing on a front porch smiling. Karin picked it up. Her hand began to shake. I haven't seen this picture since I was 14. The cafe seemed to disappear around them. The conversations, the clinking dishes, the music playing overhead, none of it mattered. For the next 2 hours, Karin read through Agneta's work. Every note, every clue, every lead, every piece of hope Agneta had preserved. By the time they finished, neither woman had much coffee left. Both had cried, and something unexpected had happened. Neither felt quite so alone anymore. Over the next several months, Linnea's life changed in ways she never could have imagined. For the first time since childhood, she wasn't simply surviving, she was building something. She and Karin began working together every weekend, every evening, every spare moment. They organized Agneta's files, made phone calls, tracked records, contacted agencies, followed forgotten leads. Some went nowhere, many did. And every success felt like a small miracle. One family found a brother they hadn't seen in 27 years. Another woman discovered the truth about her birth parents after decades of uncertainty. A father finally met his granddaughter. Again and again, impossible stories became real. And every time it happened, Linnea thought about Agneta. About the years she spent doing this work quietly, without recognition, without applause, without anyone knowing. The more Linnea learned about Agneta's life, the more she understood something important. Agneta had never been trying to save people. She had simply been trying to remind them they belonged somewhere. The same gift she had unknowingly given Linnea. One afternoon in early spring, Linnea returned to the elderly care home where she had worked for years. Only this time, something felt different. As she walked the familiar halls, residents greeted her the way they always had. But she noticed things she hadn't before. A man staring at an old photograph of his wife. A woman waiting for visitors who rarely came. A resident who kept checking the front door every hour. Waiting. Always waiting. For someone? Or for connection? For family? Suddenly, Linnea saw herself in all of them. Not because they were old, because they were human. Everyone wanted the same thing. To know they mattered. To know they were remembered. To know they weren't alone. That evening, she sat beside a resident named Leonard, 91 years old, widowed, no children, few visitors. Leonard looked out the window and quietly said, "You know what people get wrong about loneliness?" Linnea shook her head. "What?" He smiled sadly. "They think it's about being alone." Then he looked at her. "It's not. It's wondering if anyone would notice if you disappeared." The words hit Linnea harder than she expected because she knew exactly what he meant. She had spent most of her life wondering the same thing, but not anymore. Not after the attic, not after Agneta, not after the letters. For the first time in her life, Linnea knew beyond doubt that someone had noticed, someone had cared, someone had loved her, and somehow that knowledge changed the way she saw everything, including herself. Later that night, Linnea stood on the dock behind Agneta's house. The lake reflected the stars like scattered diamonds, the air smelled of pine and spring water. For a long time, she simply stood there, thinking, remembering, healing. Then she looked toward the attic window, glowing softly above the house, the room where everything had begun, the room where a lonely girl discovered she had been loved all along. And for the first time in many years, Linnea made a promise to herself. She would stop defining her life by what she had lost and start defining it by what she had found, a purpose, a family, a reason to keep going. The girl who once believed nobody came looking for her was slowly becoming the woman who helped others find their way home. Summer arrived quietly at the lake. The snow disappeared. The ice melted. And for the first time in years, the old house no longer felt lonely. The front porch was used again, the kitchen filled with conversation. Laughter echoed through rooms that had once known only silence. Sometimes, Linnea still found it difficult to believe how much had changed. 6 months earlier, she had arrived carrying nothing but questions. Now, she carried something entirely different. People, stories, connections, a purpose. The attic remained exactly as Agneta had left it. Linnea refused to change it. The shelves, the boxes, the desk, the letters, they had become more than memories. They had become a map, a guide for helping others find their way back to one another. And together, Linnea and Karen continued the work. One family at a time, one story at a time, one miracle at a time. Late one August afternoon, Linnea received a call from a woman in Skåne. The woman was crying so hard she could barely speak. At first, Linnea thought something terrible had happened. Then, the woman finally managed to say, "We found him." Linnea immediately knew who she meant. A brother, missing for 38 years. One of Agneta's unfinished cases, one of the names from the list. The woman laughed through her tears. "We found him because of the notes." Linnea closed her eyes. A smile spread across her face. For a moment, she imagined Agneta sitting in her favorite armchair by the fireplace, smiling too. Another family reunited, another promise kept. As autumn approached, more stories followed. A mother found a daughter she hadn't seen since infancy. 2 sisters, separated as children, finally spoke again after 4 decades. A grandfather met his grandson for the first time. Every success felt personal. Not because Linnea had created them, because she understood what it meant to spend years believing something was lost forever and then discover it wasn't. The truth was, every family she helped brought a small piece of healing back to her as well. Each reunion answered a question she had carried since childhood. Do people really come back for each other? The answer, she had learned, was yes. Sometimes they just need help finding the road. One rainy afternoon in October, Corinne arrived carrying a cardboard box. "I found this in the back of Agneta's closet." Linnea looked up from the kitchen table. "What is it?" Karin smiled softly. "I think she wanted you to have it." Together they carried the box upstairs to the attic. For a few moments, neither woman spoke. The room still had the same effect on them. It felt sacred. Karen carefully placed the box on Agnetta's old desk. Linnea lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. Most were pictures of Agneta throughout her life. But then Linnea noticed something else. Pictures of herself, dozens of them. Her breath caught. There she was at 8 years old, standing outside a school. At 10, sitting on a playground swing. At 13, carrying books into a library. At 16, laughing with friends after a floorball match. At 18, wearing a white graduation cap. Linnea stared at them in disbelief. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Agneta had been there. Not beside her, not close enough to speak, but there. Watching is greater than, clears throat, is greater than, protecting, remembering, every milestone, every year. Every version of the girl she promised never to stop looking for. At the bottom of the box sat a single envelope. Unlike the others, it had never been opened. Across the front were 3 words. For Linnea, finally. Her hands trembled. Karen quietly squeezed her shoulder and stepped away. Giving her privacy, Linnea opened the envelope. Inside was Agneta's final letter, the last one. The handwriting was shakier than before. Yet every word felt alive. My dearest Linnea, if you are reading this, then life finally brought you home. Tears blurred the page almost immediately. She continued. There is something I have wanted to tell you for nearly 20 years. Your mother knew she was dying. The night before she passed away, she asked me to make a promise. Not to save you, not to protect you. You were always stronger than she was. She asked me to make sure you never doubted that you were loved. Linnea lowered her head. The tears came faster now. Agneta's words continued. I failed many times. I couldn't bring you home. I couldn't be there for your birthdays. I couldn't hold your hand when life was difficult. But please believe this. Not 1 year passed without me loving you. Not 1 birthday passed without me celebrating you. Not 1 Christmas passed without a gift waiting in case I found you. And not 1 day passed without hope. Linnea stopped reading. Her shoulders shook. 20 years. 20 years of love. 20 years of hope. 20 years of waiting, all hidden inside an attic beside a lake. She wiped her eyes and finished the final lines. Family is not always the people who raise us. Sometimes family is the people who refuse to forget us. And Linnea, you were never forgotten. Not for a single day. The letter ended there. No dramatic goodbye, no final instructions, just love. Simple, steady, enduring love. The kind that survives distance, the kind that survives time, the kind that waits. That evening, Linnea sat alone on the dock as the sun disappeared beyond the lake. The sky glowed gold and crimson. Gentle waves rushed against the shore. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had never fully known before. Peace. Not because every question had been answered, not because the past no longer hurt, but because she finally understood the truth. The lonely little girl she had carried inside her for so many years had been wrong. She had never been abandoned. She had never been forgotten. She had been loved. Loved quietly, loved faithfully. Loved from a distance. And somehow, that love had found its way to her after all. As darkness settled across the water, Linnea smiled through her tears. Then she looked toward the attic window, glowing softly above the house, and whispered the words she wished she could have said years ago. Thank you, Agneta. The wind carried the words across the lake, and for the first time they felt heard. For most of her life, Linnea Forsberg believed she had been forgotten. She believed nobody came looking for her, nobody remembered, nobody cared. But hidden inside an attic, beside a frozen lake, she discovered something beautiful. She discovered that love does not always arrive when we expect it. Sometimes it waits quietly, patiently, year after year. Agneta Sjoberg couldn't be there for Linnea's birthdays. She couldn't watch her grow up. She couldn't hold her hand through life's hardest moments. But she never stopped loving her, and she never stopped hoping they would find each other again. Maybe that's the lesson in all of this. Sometimes the people who love us most are carrying us in their hearts even when we cannot see them. And sometimes the saddest mistake we make is believing we were never loved at all, because Linnea wasn't forgotten. She was loved from a distance, and in the end, that love found its way home. If this story touched your heart, think of someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Maybe today is the day to make the call. Because life is short, and the people we love should never have to wonder if they're remembered. Thank you for listening, and remember, you matter, you are loved, and you are never as alone as you think.